friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. If you watched my last one, you know that I've gotten super sick. A lot of people are getting sick all around everywhere. There's definitely stuff going around and it's gnarly, and so I've lost my voice. I was coughing, now my family's sick. I have been a little delayed in all of the end of year content that I have loved watching and will be making, so stay tuned for favorites of the year and TBRs for the year and all that kind of stuff. It's coming. I'm very excited to make those videos, and if you have any specific ones you'd like to see from me, let me know too. Today I'm going to talk about my December wrap-up, the reading that I got done in the month of December. So let's get into the books. I will start with nonfiction. I read two very popular, beloved memoirs of 2024 that were on the nonfiction lists. I love a good celebrity memoir now and again. If I'm familiar with a celebrity, a few times I've read memoirs from people I'm not familiar with. They have an amazing story, so I do love a good one now and again. And I'll start with my very unpopular, controversial opinion on The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. I think I'm the only person that doesn't like this book. I mean, it was fine. It was fine. I gave 3 stars. It was okay. This doesn't really talk about Gilmore Girls all that much. There's a little bit. I am familiar with the show Gilmore Girls. I do really like it. I watched it, I think, twice or 3 times all the way through. A long time ago. I haven't watched it recently. I'm a fan, but I'm not like a super fan. And really, besides Gilmore Girls, I was not familiar with Kelly Bishop at all. This definitely goes into her whole life story about how she got into acting and the theater and her love life and just all kinds of different little stories about her life. And so many people I've seen absolutely love this one. The audiobook is good because she narrates it herself, but I didn't particularly find her story all that great, like all that compelling. I didn't really particularly think she shared like many good life lessons. Maybe I also just didn't love some of the decisions she made. She seemed very just like, yeah, so I had like a bunch of affairs when I was younger, so you know, and who cares? That's just what people were doing back in the 70s or whatever, 60s in New York City. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense, but it just felt, you know, there was just nothing too inspiring for me personally about it, and that's definitely an unpopular opinion. A memoir that I did read that's also very popular that I am a lot more familiar with and I just found a lot more pleasant to read was Be Ready When Luck Happens by Ina Garten. I definitely grew up watching the Food Network. I loved watching the Food Network. I watched all those shows like Chopped and Alton Brown and Bobby Flay and Giada De Laurentiis and is it Sally Ann or Susie Ann? She was the little blonde lady in her Southern Kitchen. I loved Food Network and I definitely watched some Ina Garten. I always found her very pleasant, just very like charming and elegant, and definitely a like American lifestyle that I just didn't understand as a kid. I was like, this is like what East Coast life is like. Anyways, she tells her story, a little bit about her upbringing, but mostly her time, how she got into the food business, and then just different anecdotes along the way, and she also narrates her own audiobook. I just found this one to be a lot more pleasant. If I'm comparing the 2 memoirs I read in December, I enjoy this one a lot more. Oh man, this made me want to roast chicken, and I did. Like the next day after I finished this book, I made a beautiful oven roasted chicken. That was her recipe and it turned out great. Very moist and juicy. Would highly recommend. Very easy to make, and I don't really love, I'm not great at cooking and I don't love touching meat and stuff, and it was very weird to touch chicken, but I did it and I felt very successful. Not that she really has recipes in there. It's just more of how she is who she is and who she became to be, and all the things that she did to impact like the culinary field, as well as her personal relationship with her husband, which also was very interesting to read about. Definitely like the Martha Stewart vibes, a little bit of the Julia Child vibes, because she was inspired by Julia Child, and yeah, just very enjoyable. If you love a food memoir, I'm thinking like Stanley Tucci's book or Julia Child, like this kind of gives off that energy. Next, let's move into fiction. So I didn't read too much this month, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, but I read a lot of pages. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I read books 2 and 3 in the Silo series. I read Wool in November and really wanted to close out the series. So the show is really popular. It's called Silo. It's on Apple TV Plus. It is a show that everyone is loving. And when I finished the first season, I had a lot of questions. I was so just interested to know what the heck was going on. I wanted more, and I know that there was a book series, so I figured the book series always has more information. So I dived in this year as the 2nd season has come out. Overall, I really enjoyed the series. I think it was a well done post-apocalyptic world that the author created that makes you ask a lot of questions, makes you think, but there were definitely some issues in the series that weren't quite resolved, or I just wished characters made different choices, or I wish the author answered certain questions that he brought up, or I wish he avoided certain information that really wasn't necessary to the plot. Just kind of made it more confusing. Great series. I enjoyed it. Like 3.5 stars. Was fun to read. No regrets. Definitely would recommend for those that love, you know, an apocalyptic sci-fi. I don't read science fiction very often, but I enjoyed this series. But there were definitely some issues with it too. I think that the series so far is more successful than the show. You know, everyone is loving the show, but that's probably because I read these books, and the show has deviated far off from what the books were. And that's just a little bit of me like, well, why aren't you sticking to the material that the author created? And because there are issues, maybe the series is going to get it right, but they're definitely leaning way more towards characters. This is a lot more plot heavy. Probably the character I care about the most kind of got left behind in these last books. The author just decided to explore the prequel. So these are like the prequel, that they jump back into time too, but mostly this covers what happened to the world and how it got to the place of Silo. So you get more prequel and more backstory with different characters than the main character that was introduced that I really care about in the first book. So that was also kind of a bit of a bummer. I'm very curious where the series is gonna go, but reading these books has made me change my perspective on the show and has made me a little bit more mad about what they're doing. And I'm sure that happens to a lot of readers. Anyways, that's my little rant, but definitely would recommend for science fiction readers who just love a little post-apocalyptic twang now and again. Next, I won't talk about this one in too much depth. You can watch my reading vlog for more thoughts on it, but I read Long Bright River by Liz Moore because I had library returns determine what I pick up next, and this is what I picked up. All I'll say is I think God of the Woods was a superiorly written book than this one. This is a police corruption sisterhood story. One's a police officer, one is a drug addict. It's just kind of dark and sad. It didn't really do much for me. It wasn't really compelling mystery either, but I don't necessarily think that Liz Moore is focused on the mystery. She's focused on the characters. It's more about the journey, but I thought God of the Woods was a lot more superior than this backlist book, and I think my conclusion is that I will stick to her newer releases if they are intriguing to me, not necessarily dive into her backlist. And then finally, I picked up The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. This is the book that is just under 1,000 pages and took me the longest to read. It took me the entire month of December to read. I finished it right at like 10:30 p.m. on December 31st. So really from the beginning of the month all the way to the end, this was my evening reading, and I mostly read it on my Kindle, but I did read like the last maybe 200 pages in the book. It was a journey. This is one of the books that is on a lot of the big lists all over for historical fiction reading. I always was told that this was a book about a building of a cathedral in the medieval ages, and it is that mostly, but it is a lot more character focused. Obviously with 1,000 pages, you're gonna get into the nitty gritty of everything. I landed, I think, on like 3 stars, 3.5 stars. I can see why this is a lot of people's favorite book, but I just had some really big issues with a lot of it. There was a compelling aspect to the story. Ken Follett was originally a action thriller writer. Like he writes, you know, the male-centric action-y books, and he published this in the 80s, I believe, and it became very popular and beloved. And I believe there's a movie or TV adaptation, and I definitely want to watch that because I'm so curious how that's done. I get the like compulsiveness of the story. With it being a 1,000-page book, it was still incredibly readable and very intriguing all the way through. But there were just very obvious things in here that I was like, wow, this is written by a man, and you can just tell. More specifically, all of the women and all of the sex scenes. And it's like very formulaic in terms of like the pacing. Like if it's been a long enough time, okay, we're gonna throw in a sex scene or we're gonna throw in a rape scene. And there's very super vivid, grotesque, gross sexual assault scenes and violence in here that's very strongly depicted. I have not read Game of Thrones, so I don't know if like Game of Thrones is more violent than this, but this is very violent. And I have read Outlander, and Outlander has a lot of rape scenes, but for some reason those are also really gruesome to read. And also Outlander has I'm just comparing them because I'm like, these are 2 historical fiction like saga series, and Outlander is written by a woman and Pillars of the Earth is written by a man, and you can just tell, you know, you could just tell how the women are portrayed, how sex is depicted is very porny. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but that was my issue with some of that. And there are some strong female characters in here. They're not like other girls, but they're very like the, you know, pixie, whatever the word is, pixie manic pixie girl. They're like these crazy girls that are very intense and high energy, and I'm not like other girls, and I want to be different, and I'm also like super hot and really wanting, like every man wants me. And also this deals with a lot of like church corruption. This is the early church, you know, it's the 1300s. You get to know a lot about monks and bishops and archdioceses and the king, and you get to deal with medieval English conflict. It was interesting and it was political, and I feel like I learned a lot. I don't know how historically accurate this is, but what I learned about Long Bright River, I do not like police corruption stories, and I do not like church corruption stories. I know that they're very prevalent to history and they're very real. I get so distressed when people are truly evil. Like Ken Follett wrote horribly evil men in this book. Like they are just truly villainous, despicable, disgusting human beings, particularly one man who just is the worst the worst human being ever. It was so gross to read about. So my concluding thoughts are, this was compelling. It was readable. It was interesting. I have no regrets. I enjoyed my time. Did I think it needed to be this violent and this, specifically my issue with the sex scenes and the women, the way they were written? I feel like it could have been different, could have been a little bit better. So does this belong on the best historical fiction list? I don't know if it does. I don't know if it does, but that's obviously my opinion. I think there's some really intriguing things about the characters and the way that he made me interested in this time period, but they're all just some blatant things that I don't like reading about and I don't think are necessary to the interest of the story. I don't think they need to be as explicit for me to care. That's just kind of my issue with it. Do I want to continue on in the series? I don't know, you tell me. Have you read the whole series? If you've read this book and you've read the continuation, let me know what happens. Like, I guess I could look it up on the synopsis. I don't think there's 5 or 4 books total. I know there's a prequel and there's 3 other books. I don't know if they continue on with the same characters or they jump ahead like many hundreds of years. I'm not entirely sure because this book covers about 50 years, I think, in total. And I don't know how the other ones continue on. It was a ride. It was a ride. Oh, and I will say, I guess the architecture, the cathedral and church building architecture is what inspired Ken Follett to write these books. He became obsessed with cathedrals. There's an introduction in the story. There's definitely tons of that in here and it was very skimmable. Like, I just skimmed through it because you get a character who is just trying to figure out how to build a cathedral, and I think unless you're like an engineer or an architect, I can't imagine that that's very interesting. I definitely skimmed lots and lots of pages because I was like, oh, why are we still in this cathedral? Why are you telling me about all of the intricate, very architecturally specific design words of how things are made? I don't really care. Let's move along. So that definitely happened as well. So yeah, I liked it. I didn't love it. There were some issues for me, but it was also compelling and a kind of compulsive that makes me think that maybe I want to continue reading, but I'm not sure. I'm on the fence. You tell me if you read it. And also, what are your thoughts? Have you read this as a historical fiction fan? Which I know many of you are because you watch this channel. It's primarily the genre that I read. I'm glad I read this chunkster off my shelves, but will I be keeping it on my shelves? No, I won't. And will I continue on the series? I'm not sure. That is my December reading, friends. Let me know what you thought of my thoughts. Mostly probably unpopular opinions, I don't know. But I hope your holiday season was well, your December reading was nice as you closed out the year, and I know everyone is thinking on January 2025, new year, new me, new goals. I'm definitely in that mind space too. I'm very excited to film more videos and share about what I'm thinking and processing and dreaming about in this next year. I'm really hoping 2025 will be a good one because 2024 was a rough goings, and I'm excited just for new things in this upcoming year. But yeah, thank you so much for watching and spending some time with me today, and I will see you guys in another video soon. Bye.